course, now's the perfect time to take an opportunity to remind everybody to turn these off. I don't mind if your face glows, I just don't want to hear it. I can see the blue lights coming on all you guys out there. All right, welcome candidates. Thanks for coming out tonight. Here are the rules for the forum. No eye gouging, no hitting below the belt. No, wait. Oh, wait, you can hit below the belts. You can do that. No, first candidates will be given 2 minutes each to introduce themselves. Then they will be asked a series of questions relating to their candidacy and some issues facing the nation, the state, and District 12, alternating the order of who answered the question last. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes to respond to each question, and candidates will then have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Brittany Howell is in the front row. Brittany, wave, please. Thank you. She's with the Statesboro Herald, and she is our timekeeper during your statements, candidates. During your statements and answers, she'll hold up a sign when you have 30 seconds left, 15 seconds left, and finally 0 seconds left. The questions will come from the Statesboro Herald and from questions submitted earlier. And let me tell you, legible printing got you a much more likely chance of being chosen. The questions come from the Herald, and as I said, the stack of cards here. We may not have time for all your questions, so we'll try to ask those questions which have the greatest impact on our area. Let's get started with opening statements. Mr. Allen, you get to go first. You have 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Phil, and I appreciate the Statesboro Herald and Ogeechee Tech for putting on this tonight. First, I want to recognize my wife, Robin Allen. Robin, please stand up, and I want to publicly thank her for the last 3 years. Y'all, let's thank Robin. She's been great. We have 4 children, and they're all married and gainfully employed, and we have 7 grandchildren. And of course, as a family, we have a great time together. And Robin, thank you so much again for everything you've done for me. You know, Robin and I have been going to the same church for 41 years, and we have 37 years ago, we took our savings and we started a small construction company in Augusta. Over the years, that company has grown, and we have created jobs. We have grown the economy, and we've actually balanced our budget all 37 years. And you know what? The folks in Washington can't seem to do either of those things. That's why I'm running for the United States Congress. I was born on a small farm in Evans, Georgia, and I learned a couple of leadership skills while working on that farm. First is you never ask anyone to do something you're not willing to do yourself. And second, you help other folks and you don't ask anything in return. Now, wouldn't that be a breath of fresh air in the United States Congress? I want to thank you again for being here tonight. I want to thank you for coming out. I'm Rick Allen, and I'm looking forward to the evening. Thank you very much.
Congressman Barrow.
Thank you, Phil. Good evening. I want to thank the folks who put this on, Ogeechee Tech and the Statesboro Herald, and I want to thank all of y'all for caring enough to get involved in this process. Look, my work in Congress has been focused on 3 things: jobs, accessibility, and accountability. On the subject of jobs, I am proud to have played a leading role in the 3 largest job-creating enterprises, not just in this state, but in this region. I'm talking about deepening the port of Savannah, expanding Plant Vogtle, and bringing the Cyber Command from Maryland down to Fort Gordon. Each of these is bringing thousands of really good jobs to this district. On the subject of accessibility, I'm proud of the fact that everywhere I go, people say, John, we never had a congressman work this hard to spend time with us to understand our issues and take our concerns to Washington. I'm proud of that fact. And on the subject of accountability, I think Congress ought to be held to the same standards everybody else is. That's why I don't take the taxpayer-subsidized health insurance subsidy. I give that back to the taxpayers because I think it's wrong for Congress to keep theirs when everybody else is losing theirs because this Congress won't fix what's broke with Obamacare. It's why during the government shutdown, which my opponent supported, I gave my pay to the Augusta Warrior Project because I think it was wrong for Congress to get paid when they were not doing their job, they weren't letting anybody else do their job either. I'm probably proudest of the fact that I've earned a reputation in Congress as someone who can work with folks on both sides of the aisle, Democrat or Republican, to get things done. I'm the most bipartisan member of Congress by the numbers, and I'm proud of that fact. Now, during this debate, my opponent's going to spend an awful lot of time trying to convince you that he and I are both something we're not. He's going to say a lot of things about my record that probably aren't true, and say as little about his as possible. But one thing I think you know, sure as shooting, if he's elected, he's going to take his place in that bitter, partisan, do-nothing culture up there that we already have enough of in Congress. I'm going to continue to be independent and put the interests of Georgia above either party or both parties in Washington, because that's what I've done from day one. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, let's get to the questions. Question number one comes from the Statesboro Herald. According to Rasmussen reports, a poll released on October 2nd, only 8% of people polled think Congress is doing a good job. Mr. Allen, why should voters believe you would make a real difference in helping Congress become a more effective governing body? And then Congressman Barrow, when it's your turn, you have been part of a branch of a government that gets less effective each year. Why should voters believe you have earned a sixth term? So, Mr. Allen, why do you believe you'd make a real difference if you were elected to Congress?
Well, Phil, I've talked about my experience. Again, I'm not a politician. I've never served in public office. And of course, my opponent says I've raised taxes, and of course, he's put words in my mouth about shutting the government down and about the bipartisanship and that sort of thing. So I will comment on the jobs issue. It was actually our ranking Republican leader on the Intel committee that got NSA to Fort Gordon. And when an NSA came to Fort Gordon, Cyber Command followed it. And the Cyber Command followed it against heavy Democratic opposition in Maryland. So I think we need to set the record straight on that. But let me tell you what the bottom line is, folks. John Barrow's going to say whatever it takes to get reelected to the United States Congress. That's why I want term limits. That's why I've said I'm going to serve 8 years. I think that's what's wrong with Congress, and I think that's why they have such a poor approval rating, is because nobody trusts what they're going to say. They just, term after term, come down here, and they tell you whatever you want to hear to get reelected. I think that's wrong, and that's what I'll change in the United States Congress. Thank you very much.
Congressman Barrow, again, the question is, why should voters believe you are earning a sixth term?
Thank you, Phil. You began with talking about the public's assessment of Congress and why it's as low as it is, and I understand why it's as low as it is. But I challenge you to find anybody who thinks that the reason that Congress is as screwed up as it is because it has too many moderate centrists like me who are working in a bipartisan fashion with folks on both sides of the aisle. I think you'll find by every assessment, by the numbers and by the results, you see this exact opposite. Over the last 10 years, the few remaining moderate Republicans and the moderate Democrats have been swept out to be replaced by folks who are more extreme, more partisan, folks who can't even agree on what the problem is, much less the solution. If I deserve another term, it's for the same reason why I'm running in the first place and why I ran in the first place. I'm concerned about the direction in which our country is headed. And I know that we're not going to solve any problems at the national level unless we have folks in Congress who can work together in a bipartisan fashion to come up with solutions that have a broad base of support throughout the country. I'm running because I'm one of the few folks up there who's demonstrated an ability to do that. And by the numbers, I'm the most bipartisan member of Congress who's running for re-election this year. I'm running because there are not enough folks like me up there. And the last thing I think we need to do, the very last thing we need to do if we're going to address the problem of Congress as we understand it, is to take the most bipartisan member of Congress and replace him with one of the most partisan candidates around. That is certainly not the cure for what ails the U.S. House of Representatives.
All right, we're going to mix it up a little bit. Now, Congressman Barrow, you get the first question here, or you get the next question, excuse me. Are you for or against the XL pipeline? If so, and why? And then just tell us more about your energy policy as well.
Absolutely, I'm in favor of the Keystone Pipeline. In fact, I'm one of the leading proponents of the Keystone Pipeline. I took on the Democrats in Congress to bring a vote to the floor of the House of Representatives to let folks show where they stand on this issue. You bet I support it. Here's the reason why. There are a lot of Democrats, a lot of folks on the environmental who think that if we somehow deny ourselves access to this new source of traditional energy, that somehow that's going to spare the world the consequences of its consumption. That ain't going to happen at all. It's going to get extracted, it's going to be developed, and it's going to be consumed. The only real issue for us to decide is whether we want to be at the end of the pipeline or we want ports that are going to export to China to be at the end of the pipeline. That is the only real issue before us. I also think it's important for us to recognize the progress we've made in this country in order to try and wean ourselves off of foreign oil, but we still remain dependent on oil. You asked me about my energy policy generally. It ought to be that we develop a crash program of intense, basic research to come up with new sources of energy that are not only as cheap as what we're using today and as abundant as what we're using today, but cleaner than what we're using today. That is how America's always tackled the tough challenges we've had in the past, the real existential threats. That's how we got the bomb when we were in a race with Hitler to get the bomb. That's how we built the personal computer. That's how we got to the moon when we were in a race to get to the moon. We tackled it with that level of commitment. I'm convinced that if we did that, we could create new sources of energy that are just as cheap, just as abundant, but a lot cleaner than what we're using. In the meantime, we have to make use of the God-given resources we've got, and I'm a leading proponent of doing just that.
Mr. Allen, your view on the Keystone Pipeline and your energy policy in general.
Absolutely, we need the Keystone Pipeline. And in fact, North America has the opportunity to be energy independent. And we need to work toward that goal. I need to give you a little history lesson on my opponent here. He was elected in 2004. In 2006, the Democrats, his party, took over the House and the Senate. And in 2006 and 2008, John Barra voted for Nancy Pelosi, the most partisan member of the United States Congress. Now, the partisan problem in the United States Congress is not with the House. We've got many folks in the House working mutually to solve the problems of America. The problem with partisanship is in the Senate with Harry Reid. There are 372 bills sitting on Harry Reid's desk today. And, you know, John, you have all this influence. Why don't you get your friends to approve those bills, and let's move the country on and get your president to approve XL Pipeline?
Mr. Allen, this question is for you. Every day that goes by, more and more baby boomers are retiring or getting set to retire. What would you do to make sure that Social Security is there for them? Would you consider privatizing Social Security?
I've looked at a number of issues with the Social Security, and obviously we've got to do something. I know when I was 40 years old, I tell you, I never thought I'd draw Social Security. And I've talked to a number of people who are 40 years old today, and they don't think they're going to ever draw Social Security. Well, Nancy Pelosi says we don't have a problem with Social Security. I mean, it's just going to keep going. Well, guess what? We do have a problem with Social Security. We're going to run out of money. We got to solve that problem, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and go do it. I mean, this thing has been, President Bush, one of his initiatives after being reelected in 2006 was to fix Social Security. And guess what? He got nowhere with it. We've got to fix it, and I'm ready to get to work on that. And there are a number of options. But, as far as Social Security, those who have earned Social Security, we need to allow them to continue to draw Social Security. But we're going to have to come up with a plan to fix it. And I'm ready to do that, and I'm ready to go to Congress and solve these problems. That's what I do in work every day, and this problem can be solved. Thank you.
Congressman Barrow.
I just heard my opponent say the problem with partisanship in Congress is the other party and the leadership of the other party. I'm here to tell you it's the leadership on both sides who are responding to the views, the felt views of the vast majority of folks on both sides, all of whom come to Congress from too partisan a base to begin with, so naturally their leaders reflect that. I heard my opponent say that George Bush wanted to fix Social Security, and he puts an approving stamp on George Bush's approach. Let me tell you what George Bush's approach was. It was to privatize Social Security for everybody 55 and below, to make a devil's bargain with those folks who are 55 and above and say, don't worry, we'll take care of you, but you folks who haven't paid in all your time yet, you only paid in 30, 35, maybe 25 years, you're getting a different deal. You're going to get, instead of a life insurance product that will last as long as you live, you're going to get a savings plan that will last only as long as you kicked in what you kicked in. Good luck with that. Some of the proudest work I did when I was in the minority in Congress was to go about the district and lead folks on an understanding of how we saved Social Security back in the 1980s and how we need to take that as our model for saving Medicare in the future. We sealed it by agreeing not to privatize it, which is what George Bush wanted to do. The fix that my opponent speaks of approvingly is just one good idea among others. We decided not to privatize it, and that's the first thing we got to decide. Is it going to be something that's going to be a guaranteed benefit that will last as long as you live, that you'll never outlive, or is it going to be some kind of a savings plan where you're making a gamble with the Grim Reaper, and if you live long enough, you're out of luck? I don't believe that hasn't been the solution for folks since this program was started. We can thank Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan for approaching the solution of that problem in a bipartisan fashion, but they had to get their minds right first about whether or not they were going to privatize it. As long as my opponent thinks that's an option on the table, he won't make a helpful or constructive contribution to that debate. We need to save it as both a program and make sure that it lasts for folks who've paid into it, not just for 35 years, but for 25 and 20 years, because it's done more good than any other federal program in the lifetime of folks now living.
Bill, I'd like to respond to that, please.
You had a few seconds left, so
Yes.
go ahead, Rick.
I'd like to respond to that comment. President Bush put a couple of options on the table, and the good senator from New York said Social Security is off the table, period. And so did the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. Off the table. So, I've taken no position with privatizing Social Security, folks. I'm just saying it's got to be fixed. We need to look at all the options, and we need to work on it. And we need to work on it and put it back on the table and solve it, because John Barrow's people do not want to talk about it. I'm just telling you, he's been there 10 years, and now we're talking about this? Come on, y'all. We can do better than this. Thank you very much.
Would you like additional time, or you want to save that for later?
I think it's been said.
All right, save
He
it for
does
later.
not get a rebuttal, Phil.
How serious a threat to our national security? This is a question for Congressman Barrow. How serious a threat to our national security do you view ISIL? Should we be committing more military assets to defeat this group, including putting more troops on the ground in Iraq and Syria? Tell us about your foreign policy views as they pertain to the Middle East.
Well, first off, I think ISIS is a very serious threat to us. If they could, they'd do to every one of us what they did to those poor victims on videotape. There's no question how crazy they are, and we need to fight them and kill them where they are. I think we have to be smart about it, though. I think we can afford to be smart about it, and we should be smart about it. I think there ought to be boots on the ground fighting these guys, all right, and I think we ought to help the folks who are wearing those boots. But I don't think they have to be American GIs. There are people who are in the backyard who are in a life and death struggle with the worst terrorists in the world, and I think it behooves us to give them a little aid and comfort, help them do the fighting for us on the ground, and provide them whatever assistance they need in the way of intelligence and otherwise that we can without exposing American troops to any unnecessary risk of harm. The main constructive role we can play is to provide death from above, to provide the kind of technological superiority that only we can provide. You'll remember that's how we got rid of Gaddafi. There were plenty of boots on the ground, and we gave them all kinds of aid and comfort without jumping into the middle of a civil war where we'd be shooting at folks on all sides and everybody be shooting at us from all sides. But we did provide all kinds of deadly assistance from the sky, and the combination worked. Seems to me that's the most sensible approach to take right now, and it happens to be the approach that a bipartisan majority of the Congress, in a rare spasm of bipartisanship, has agreed is the right course to pursue. And for the time being, I believe that's the case.
Mr. Allen?
Yes, I attended a briefing on this situation last Friday, and I think the thing that disturbed me the most is our ranking Republican member of the Intel Committee gets the same briefs on ISIL as our president gets. We've known about this problem for a long time. In fact, Abadati he was thrown out of Al-Qaeda years ago and has assembled, we think now, almost 30,000 troops, and they're recruiting all over the world. In fact, intelligence has said that it could take as many as 30 years to deal with these people. Folks, we got a threat here, and we got to deal with it. And you know what I think we need to do? We need to let our security and our military people deal with it and not have another political war on our hands. They need to deal with it, These folks are evil. I know that you, as I am, are getting sick and tired of watching television at night and seeing this evil prevail in our day and time. We've got to do something about it, and I'll tell you something else. I'm sick and tired of paying for it. You know, the folks in the Middle East need to ante up, because we've got the greatest fighting machine in the world. We'll deal with them, but doggone it, somebody else needs to be paying the bill. Thank you very much.
Mr. Allen, this question is for you. The gap between the haves, the have-nots, the top 1% and the 99% continues to grow larger every day. What are your economic views as they relate to helping folks at the bottom as well as shoring up the middle class?
Yeah. Well, the problem we've got is the same problem folks in our company have, and that is because of the economy, because of the leadership in this country, frankly, we haven't been able to give a reasonable compensation increase for over 6 years. And that's very troubling because gas has doubled, almost tripled. Groceries have doubled. You know, you can't keep your health care plan. You can't keep your doctor. Your health insurance is going up. And you know, a lot of people are owe more on their home than they can get for it. And folks, they're living paycheck to paycheck. And yes, our middle class is disappearing rapidly because of the policies of this administration. We've got to change this. We've got to remove all of the restrictions on this economy and get this economy growing. This economy is ready to grow. It's ready to produce jobs. And we must get those folks who are at home drawing government entitlements back to work. It's just that simple. I think they want to go back to work. And I want them to make a decent wage. And we can do that. We did it 20 years ago. You know, every welfare reform we made in the 90s, they were all reversed in the 2009 stimulus bill that John Barrow voted for. And now we got 48 million people on food stamps and 92 million people sitting at home. Folks, this is unconscionable. And this is what I want to change in the United States Congress. Thank you very much.
Congressman?
The Recovery Act, which Senator Jack Hill said it was an absolute lifeline for the state of Georgia and prevented the state of Georgia from going bankrupt. If it hadn't been for the Recovery Act, the state of Georgia government would not have survived, did not put 48 million people on food stamps. The Recovery Act responded to the conditions that existed at the time. The question was, what should our policy be toward helping folks at the bottom? And I'll take an example. I think it's time for an adjustment in the minimum wage. Even Governor Romney and Rick Santorum thinks it's time for an adjustment in the minimum wage. But I think it should be done in such a fashion that it doesn't cost people any jobs. That's why I think it has to be phased in gradually. That's why I think we need to have things like sub-minimum wages for people that it's never really designed to provide a living wage for, like kids who are living with their parents and working at the fast food place on, during the summer breaks. These are the kinds of things that I think, but a minimum wage is no solution to the main problem. I don't think you're going to solve the problem the way a lot of Democrats want to do, which is just tax the rich. We have to recognize that the main problem we got is too many people chasing too few jobs. I guarantee you that if we had more jobs than people to do them, the minimum wage problem would take care of itself. We had a full jobs economy in the 1990s, and we ought to do everything we can to bring that about. Practical measures that I think would do that do involve getting the federal government out of the way of job creators. I do think this administration has gone overboard in lots of ways in pushing regulations where the cost way outweighs the benefit. One of the ideas from Simpson-Bowles, which I support, I don't support a lot of things in Simpson-Bowles, but one of the things I do support is their recommendation for a wholesale repeal and replacement of our income tax code, because that would unleash more capital that's sitting on the sidelines waiting to know what the rules of the road are going to be for the next 10, 20 years than anything else we can do. And that would do more to create jobs than anything the government can do directly. Those are the kinds of things I think we need to do as a nation. Lead, follow, or get out of the way of the private sector.
Congressman Barrow, you've built strong relationships with veterans groups in District 12. How could the very serious problems, of the Veterans Administration rise to such dangerous levels, right under Congress's nose? What is your plan to fix the Veterans Administration?
It's not just under Congress's nose because they lie to Congress. It's also under every administration's nose. It was no fun to call for the resignation of General Shinseki. He's a fine fella, but he got lied to so much by his own people that he no longer could effectively and credibly serve. And so I was among the first to call for his resignation. The culture of bureaucratic incompetence in the VA is so deeply ingrained in that place that I think we need a wholesale reevaluation of what we're getting for the resources we're giving them. We're giving them vast resources in money. We're spending 82% more per year in veterans health care this year than we were just 7 or 8 years ago. We're giving them vast resources in physical infrastructure, buildings to administer. We're giving them vast resources in other respects, but we're not getting the best bang for our buck. Why? Because we've been doing the same thing that we've done forever and keep on adding more and glomming more stuff onto the same thing. And many of the approaches that were appropriate in the 1940s and 1950s are no longer appropriate for today's economy. Back in the 1950s, any 100-bed hospital could provide exactly the same care anywhere in the country that any other 100-bed hospital in the country could provide. Can't say that today. We need to assess what we're doing, what we're making available in the VA system that's best provided there and can only be got there, and build on and preserve that, and take a look at those things that we're doing that could be done better on the outside. That's why I voted for the first step in reforming the VA that we've had in this country. It gives veterans the opportunity to opt out of the VA network and go get health care in the community if they've waited more than 14 days or live more than 40 miles away. And it gives the secretary the power to fire any one of the top 400 positions for not doing their job. It's the inability to do that that's allowed time servers like permanent bureaucrats to stymie the initiatives of people like General Shinseki. We got to clear out the underbrush and get rid of the Bureau of Deadwood from the top all the way down.
Mr. Allen, if you were elected, what would you do to help fix the Veterans Administration?
Well, it's interesting that John Barrow talks about the bureaucrats. Well, if you look at John's FEC report, the public employee unions contribute hundreds of thousands of dollars to his campaign. He's got to take care of those folks, and that's the biggest problem with the government bureaucrats. You can't fire them. And I spent 3 hours at the Augusta VA on Friday afternoon, and we were on a listening tour. And the things I heard were this: those folks are doing a great job. Let me tell you, I was in the research department, and y'all, this is what's so ridiculous. They get a 3-year grant, and the physician there orders equipment. It's 2.5 years before he gets the equipment to do the grant. Y'all, these are common sense solutions. I tell you, I am so fired up about going to Washington and fixing these things. I don't know what to do. But I sat there and we talked about it, and we left there, and I said, I know exactly what you folks need. They need autonomy. Because everything in the government is driven top down. Folks in the business world, we drive it bottom up. We could not survive in a top down environment. And John Barrow's part of that. He's part of that system, and that's why he needs to go, and that's why they need to go. Thank you very much.
Well, we've reached about the halfway point right now. If anyone needs a stretch, go ahead and do it now. All right, let's see. This question is going to be for Rick Allen. Rick, a new farm bill passed this year, and funding for the Port of Savannah was finally approved. How do you see the provisions of the farm bill helping folks in District 12, And as a congressman, how can you help the folks in District 12 capitalize on the Port of Savannah?
Well, I'll tell you, what's great about the Port of Savannah is it's an export port. We send more out than we get back in. And what's amazing is our onion farmers. I mean, they're growing onions in Peru right now, shipping them in through Savannah and selling them through a distribution network. And they're going to be growing onions, over the winter. And they grow onions in Texas and in California. I mean, it's amazing what our farmers are doing. And of course, I have a lot of experience in agriculture, not a lot in the crop area. But I will tell you this, the Farm Bill is the most complicated thing I think I've sat through. I went through a 3-hour orientation. And again, I'm not a crop farmer, but I had the farmers asking me questions about the Farm Bill. But pretty much the government wants to dictate what they grow, how they're protected, and that sort of thing. You know what the farmers are telling me? Farmers are telling me they want the government out of the way. They want some price protection, crop insurance, and some market protection. And because when they put that crop in, they need to have some idea of what they're going to be able to sell it for, or they've lost the farm. And we don't need to put our farmers at that kind of risk. The other thing is they need labor. And y'all, the guest worker program doesn't work. I mean, it's cost. We got one farmer that's sold his business because of the guest worker program. Y'all, these people couldn't even pick enough onions to make minimum wage. And the government sued him and won $350,000. And you know what? He didn't have an option to hire them. He had to hire those folks. And they couldn't even pick enough onions to make minimum wage. Y'all, it's just a sad state of affairs in this bureaucracy we have. We can fix these problems, and that's what I want to do. As far as the Port of Savannah, I can tell you this, my opponent takes credit for deepening the harbor, but I can tell you his president took it out of the budget. And we got a couple of senators, I think, in Georgia that take issue with him on who got that done. Thank you very much.
Congressman?
Let me take up the subject of the Port of Savannah first, then move to the Farm Bill. First off, I've never claimed to have been personally responsible for deepening the Port of Savannah, but I do claim, I do claim to have played a leading role in building the bipartisan base of support that was necessary in order to pass a Water Resources Development Act that would clear the final hurdles away so that Savannah could go first. And if you think that a couple of Republican senators did it by themselves, you don't know how Congress works. If you think a Democratic congressman from Georgia did it all by himself, you don't know how Congress works. What we did is we worked with our colleagues who have similar situations around the country, and we were already ahead in line in terms of the processing, so we made everybody understand they all had a stake in deepening their ports. And that's how we built the base of support that made it possible for Congress to pass one of the few bipartisan bills that have been passed in this Congress. And it wasn't done with folks who say the problem with partisanship is all the party on the other side. It took folks like John Barrow working with Saxby Chambliss and Johnny Isakson and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, on the other side of the river, to create a bipartisan coalition that could support something that was going to help us before everybody else. Now, that's what it took. And I'm proud of that work. It also involved relationship building. We didn't get a bunch of Tea Party Republicans in North Georgia to come along to this idea until I worked with friends in Atlanta who thought the sun and the moon rises and sets on the Atlanta airport to make them understand how important Savannah is to Atlanta. Working with my friends in the delegation from the Atlanta area and the mayors of Atlanta, Shirley Franklin and Kasim Reed, we built a coalition of support for that. And that's what it took to get pressure on the other side so that everybody would be on the same page. That's the true story of what happened. Now, on the subject of the Farm Bill, I'm very proud to have played a leading role in the passage of the Farm Bill this year, which provides a safety net for farmers and a safety net for families. Bottom line is we weren't going to get one without the other. And we created large bipartisan coalitions to support reforms in both. We're no longer paying farmers not to farm, and we're no longer losing the investments that family farmers have made in their families, in their family farms. So in all these respects, I think working with folks in a bipartisan fashion is the only way to go.
All right, Congressman, this question is for you. We have aging highways, crumbling bridges. What investments would you propose Congress make in United States infrastructure? And then in particular, what kind of infrastructure needs do we have here in Georgia's 12th?
Well, we need to invest in our infrastructure, the basic infrastructure, because that's the one thing government does that has the longest tradition of support under our Constitution. Internal improvements is what they used to argue about in the early 1800s. Does Congress have any role at all to play in trying to help us create a growth platform for private enterprise? I think we answered that question back in the 1820s, and it's still with us today. I think the Water Resources Development Act probably is the biggest investment we've made in infrastructure and the growth platform for private enterprise that nobody knows about or that nobody thinks about when they go to the stores. It supports exports, as Rick said. It also supports imports. It creates a thriving logistics trade all throughout our district. Over 350,000 jobs in the state depend directly on the port, and 25,000 of them in our district alone. So it's vital that we continue to promote that.
Mr. Allen?
Yes, I went to the Georgia DOT. They did a tour recently, and I attended their briefing. And there is a huge amount of investment needed to just get our bridges where some of them can carry the weight of a truck. And so we're going to shut down some truck traffic based on load capacity on some of our roads here in Georgia, which is not going to be good, particularly for our rural areas. We've got to invest in this. Folks, our problem is this. We depend on a gas tax, and frankly, we're burning less gas, and we've got more traffic. We also have some problems with directing our trucks. One of the solutions that I like is an intermodal transfer facility, and I know that's a technical idea, but basically you take trucks and you put those trucks on railroad cars or the trailers on railroad cars, and you ship them. Most of the goods that come, a lot of the goods that come in from Savannah go through over to the Mississippi in that direction. That would help. They're talking about one in Augusta. There are over 1,700 trucks a day that go through up I-20 and to the intermodal transfer facility in Atlanta. And we could save that much wear and tear on our interstates. These are solutions that we can create, that would also save fuel. But we have got to come up with a program. The government's got to get our priorities in order, because infrastructure improvement creates jobs. This government's doing entirely too many things to eliminate job creation. We must get in the business of creating jobs, and that's what I'll do for you in the United States Congress. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Allen, this question is for you. There's no doubt that the national debt is a very large number, a number most of us can't even really comprehend when it's in the trillions. For one thing, is the national debt level a dangerous to the U.S. economy? What would you do to tackle the national debt? And do you believe in a balanced budget amendment?
I do believe in a balanced budget amendment. I think that's the only way we're going to discipline the politicians in Washington we don't have an income problem. We got a spending problem in Washington. Let me just give an example. When my opponent was elected to the United States Congress, we had a $2.3 trillion government. Now that's big. You know what the size of the government is today in less than 10 years? $4 trillion. What have you been involved in over these last 10 years that has increased at that kind of pace? And why? Because, all we hear about, we're cutting this, we're cutting our military, we're cutting other things. What in the world are we doing in Washington? Now, let me tell you what that does to an economy. Right now, the government is creating jobs and the private sector is not. And until we decrease the size of government, then the private sector will not react. There's only so much economy. The good news is that we have collected almost $3 trillion in revenue this past year. Now think about this. And, I don't understand why these things happen after you've been in Congress 10 years. Maybe it just takes a little time to figure these things out. But I can tell you what, the day I get to Congress, I'm going to hit the ground running, and we're going to do something about this budget. Because think about this. If this Congress had gotten together 10 years ago, or even 6 years ago, and said we're going to have modest increases in our expenses, we'd have a balanced budget today. Entirely possible. But no, total irresponsibility. That's what has to change in Washington. Thank you very much.
Congressman?
I'm not a blue dog for nothing. I think this is the number one threat to our national security, is our national debt. I agree with the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who said the number one threat to our national security is not our enemies, it's ourselves. Because if we cannot afford to pay for our defense in the future, we will be defenseless in the future. And he was right. That's why I support, unlike a lot of Democrats, I support a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. I think it's high time that we live under the same constraints that the states do, long past due, and I have voted for one, and I'll continue to do so. Here's the reason why. If Congress and the President won't do their constitutional authority to agree on a budget, much less a budget that will come into balance, then it should be up to the third branch of government to do it for them. I can tell you that's the way it's done in the states. And it hardly ever has to happen because they don't want that to happen. But that is only the first step, and it's a backstop. Because having a way to make it be done doesn't tell us how to do it, and it certainly doesn't tell Congress how they should do their responsibility. That's why, beyond just agreeing on some mechanism to make somebody do it, Congress should fulfill its constitutional responsibility to do this. And the way you do that is you identify wasteful spending, such as I have, and you agree on a bipartisan plan for identifying cuts in spending that both parties can agree on and work with, because nothing else is going to be enacted. We certainly don't want to defer to the courts or somebody else to do this job for us. And one way I tell you can do this, one reason you get partisan budgets that are going nowhere, that really deserve to go nowhere, because Democratic budgets always want to raise taxes and Republican budgets always want to cut Medicare, cut benefits. They're not going anywhere because they're partisan documents that are designed to provide bulletin board material for the base. If we had a real no budget, no pay law, not the kind that my opponent criticized me voting against, but a real one, I guarantee you Congress would pass a budget. Because if they didn't get paid until they did the most basic function, they'd get it done, I guarantee you. That's why I support real no budget, no pay, because nothing less is going to make Congress do what they're supposed to do under the Constitution.
Congressman, this question is for you. No one seems to really like the Affordable Care Act, but nobody seems to know how to fix it or even know why they don't like it. Tell me the top 3 things that you would do to fix ACA or to improve health care in the United States.
Well, I think the first and biggest thing you've got to do to address the health care problem in this country is you got to address Obamacare, because it's the biggest thing that Congress has some responsibility for. I want to be clear about this. I voted against the bill at every stage of the way, in committee and on the floor as it moved through Congress. Not because I didn't think it was going to do some good for some people, but because I knew, when doing my homework, that it was going to do a whole lot more harm to a whole lot more people than the folks who voted for it realized. And I think I've been proven right on this. I think the only approach to this is the one that Congress has been taking, I think in a very partisan fashion. That's to fix the thing. When my opponent tells you that I voted 28 times for Obamacare or to defend Obamacare, he's not telling you the truth. There have been 50+ votes on repealing or amending parts of the bill, small parts. Some of these I think should be repealed, some of these I think shouldn't. For example, I am a staunch opponent of the individual mandate. I think it should be repealed. The employer mandate, I think it should be repealed. The cuts to Medicare, I think they should be repealed. The provision that forces you to get your insurance through the IRS and let them decide how much it's going to cost, that should be repealed. The granting of authority to a nameless bureaucratic bunch of appointees to decide what insurance companies have to cover and what they don't, the so-called death panel, all those things need to be repealed. And you can list any one of those as the top 3, and I've already voted to repeal all of them. But unlike Rick, who says the thing's not fixable, got to repeal the whole thing, I don't want to go back to the day when someone can be discriminated against on the basis of a pre-existing condition. Look, I'm a cancer survivor. I'll bet there are a few in this room. There are millions in America who beat cancer. And it makes absolutely no sense for folks to pay for insurance all their lives only to be kicked off the policy the minute they get really sick. Or if their insurance helps them beat the cancer, to make it impossible for them to get insurance to deal with the next problem in their health history. That makes no sense at all. Even Governor Romney thinks we ought to keep some things. That's why I support a repeal of the bill that will keep the provisions we all agree we want and get rid of the rest.
Mr. Allen?
Well, number one, the reason the mandates are in the law to pay for it, I mean, they're asking young people to pay 10 times what it costs them in health insurance every year with a $5,000 deductible to pay for our health care. As far as pre-existing condition, yes, we need to take care of folks. There's no question about it, and there are ways to do that. You know, I want to get back to people helping people and businesses creating jobs. Y'all, I think the real question here is this. John McCain won this district with 62% of the vote in 2008. I think the question is, and I voted for John McCain. If John McCain had been elected president, we'd have never had the biggest job-killing, largest tax increase in the way of Obamacare in the history of this country. I want to know who John Barrow voted for president, and I think he should reveal that, and that's the reason we have Obamacare. We know he voted for Nancy Pelosi in 2006 and 2008, and she is the one said, we will pass it, and then we'll figure out what it says. Y'all, how irresponsible is that, for crying out loud? Thank you very much.
We got time for a couple more questions. Mr. Allen, this one's for you. The ads we've seen on the TV, we've heard them on the radio. If you've still got a landline at home, you've probably got a phone call or two. And they seem to, every year it seems like they get more and more negative. So my question to you is, do these types of ads, do they have to be part of our campaigns nowadays? And do you see any changes in the way campaigns are run in the future?
Well, I'll tell you this, I can't let my wife watch television. Because I don't want her to, because it's hard for us to go to bed at night, to be honest with you, because I'm getting accused of raising taxes, and I've never held public office. I'm accused of spending $184 million of government dollars and not doing a thing in return for it. You know, those poor guys in the ditch, John, in 110-degree weather who are working out there sweating to build a beautiful building, they're not going to vote for you because of that, because they're pretty upset because, they built some beautiful buildings. And these were SPLOST jobs. These were not federal jobs, as his friends at the DCCC. And by the way, Ms. Pelosi's putting several $100,000 in this race. No telling what she's going to talk about. But I can tell you this, we did a few SPLOST projects, and yes, the people voted to build those projects, and we did a great job, and we were the low bidder on those jobs. In fact, if you look back at what the difference in our bid and the second bid, we saved the Richmond and Columbia County people $9.2 million. I didn't hear that said on the ad. But that's the kind of things that's going on out there. Of course, I'm going to take away student loans, and I think that's ridiculous, because no, we don't need the Department of Education, and those student loans need to come to our state level and our universities. But yeah, it just goes on and on. They just make up things, and yes, all we're doing with our ads, number one, is you'll see on our ads, there's always something backing that ad up, or a link to go to prove what we're saying in that ad. I think it's fine to vet the candidates, but to outright lie and to try to, the hypocrisy of this, y'all, is the biggest issue in this campaign, is jobs in the economy. And his party's trying to destroy our business. It's so sad. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Congressman?
First off, I know that some folks in the peanut gallery aren't going to believe this or credit it, but I haven't said anything about my opponent in this race yet. Not a one of my messages has even referred to him. All of my messages that I'm responsible for, that I approve, have been about what I have done and what I stand for. And yeah, there's a lot of negative stuff out there. And if someone's going to complain about things being said about them, maybe they ought to take stock about what they're saying. When my opponent tells me that I vote 85% of the time with Barack Obama, and cherry picks the time frame and treats little issues as exactly the same weight as big issues, he ain't telling you the truth. The truth is that I disagree with this president on cap and trade, Wall Street bailout, Obamacare, immigration reform, gun control, the Bergdahl deal, Benghazi, you name it. That's why organizations like the Chamber of Commerce have endorsed me. And that's why organizations like the National Association of Manufacturers have supported me. The NFIB has endorsed me. The NRA has endorsed me. If what he was saying about my record was true, they'd be endorsing him. But they're not. But they're not, because what he's saying about my record isn't true, and they know it. It's not true that I agree with the president's policies that much. It's not true that I support taxpayer funding for abortion. It's not true that I voted against no budget, no pay. It's not true that I voted against the farm bill. It's not true that I oppose an audit of the Fed. All of these things my opponents saying about me, about my record, which anybody can look up for themselves and find out is just not true. And yet he laments the fact that folks are taking him to task on his outstanding record. Well, look, your record as a businessman, if it's your only qualification for office, is something you got to expect folks to look into. But all the things you're saying about my record just aren't true. How can you expect anybody to take your word for it that everything's just fine on your side of things when everything you're saying about my record is simply not true? I ain't buying it, and neither is anybody else.
I'd like to offer a rebuttal on that.
One last question.
I need a rebuttal on that.
No, you've already had a chance to rebut. I'm sorry. Last question of the night here before we get to our closing statements. And the leadoff question goes to Congressman Barrow. What are the issues? You represent Georgia's 12th first, and then, of course, America as well. What are the top issues on your agenda if you were to be elected and go back to Washington? What are the top issues that are important to you as they relate to Georgia's 12th?
They continue to be the things that I talked about at the outset that I'm focused on. Creating jobs. I'm real proud to have played a leading role in bringing 3 of the largest job-creating enterprises in the entire region of the country here. It's a leading role. I'm not dictating it, and I'm not responsible for it personally, but it's taken a broad bipartisan base of support in Congress to get the Cyber Command here, to expand the port of Savannah, to build the first nuclear reactors in this country in 30 years. It literally took a bipartisan vote of the House to do it because they couldn't do it on their side of the aisle. That's important, and we're going to be the beneficiary of this in the short run and in the long run. But I also think accessibility is important. You got to be in the district to know what they're doing in Washington. I'll be honest with you, because they don't tell you up there what they're fixing to do. You got to go home and spend all your waking hours, every possible minute you can, creating opportunities to meet with people and listen to them and their concerns, because that's the only way you're going to find out what the federal government's up to. And I think you have to be willing to hold Congress accountable. Congress lives by a different set of rules than everybody else, and that's wrong. Whether it's keeping frequent flyer miles, whether it's flying first class, that's little stuff. How about being paid when you don't do your job? How about being paid when you're not letting anybody else do their job? I think you need to lead by example in these ways. These are the issues: accountability, accessibility, and jobs. Those are things that I focus on, and those are things I'm going to stay focused on.
And Mr. Allen, same question to you. What are your top issues if you were to be elected and head to Washington in 2015?
The top issue is creating jobs and growing this economy. The economy is ready to grow. I have been amazed at the resiliency of the manufacturing and job creating, even our company. I've been amazed. Last year I really wondered if I'd done those guys a favor, because 7 years ago we began an ownership transition. Last year was the toughest year we've had in maybe even the history of our company. But we persevered, and it's a little better this year. But I'll tell you, our manufacturing industry, our business community has been very resilient, and that's why, I'm happy to be endorsed by the Georgia Small Business Council. We have over 300 members of the Georgia Small Business Council in the 12th District of Georgia. I don't know how many members we have of the United States Chamber of Commerce, but I doubt it's, I'd like to know, but I don't think it's very many. We have got to get our small business community creating jobs. They create over 60% of job creation out there. And the only way to do that is to get the government out of the way. Small business is so overregulated that we just can't afford to make ends meet. And so we can't afford to expand. Our banks are being handicapped because of Dodd-Frank. Frankly, I talked to a home builder the other day who's got like 10 mortgage applications sitting because of the regulatory environment with the mortgage applications. Can you imagine? That's 10 houses he needs to sell. And those are the kind of things that I'm going to correct in Washington. And guess what? The entire Georgia delegation and our folks over in South Carolina are sure trying to help me do that. And so they must know something up there in Washington that he's not telling you. I can tell you that. But yeah, they're trying to help me because they want to get something done. Because, you know, John knows how to work that system up there. And, but it's time to be truthful about things. And he's talked about my character. You know, I want to ask, why did you write a letter in 2012 to your constituents saying that you did in fact vote 85% of the time with the president, and you did in fact vote for taxpayer funding for to Planned Parenthood for abortions? We have the evidence. Thank you.
Gentlemen, we appreciate your candid responses. Give it up for the candidates before they give their.
Thank you.
They each get there's one more thing. Each of them get 2 minutes for a closing statement. Congressman Barrow, you go first.
Thank you, Phil. If there's anything that I'm proudest of my work in Congress, is that I've earned a reputation as someone who can get things done by working with anybody, Republican or Democrat, no matter how much they may be saying bad things about you that ain't true. I feel like you got to work with folks in a bipartisan fashion, whether you like it or not. First, because they got something to say. No matter how much they may be cheating in election time or lying about you, they got something to say that you need to hear, and it's the right way to do things. I also do it because whether you like it or not, it's the only way to get anything done. The way Congress is designed, with the Senate where nothing can go through unless it's very bipartisan, and a House where nothing can go through unless it's very partisan, unless you can work with folks on both sides of the aisle to bring people together, nothing is actually going to get done. And I've got a pretty good record of having done that. And the record shows it. And that's why I'm endorsed by outfits like the Chamber of Commerce and the National Rifle Association and the NFIB, the Shock Troops for Small Business in Congress. These are professional Congress watchers, and they keep score. And they look at the votes that count and look at the entire record, and they know who's on their side. I'm proud to have their endorsement. Now, I'll end where I began, taking a leading role in bringing jobs here, the most important thing that I can do, being as accessible as possible, and leading by example to hold Congress accountable. Those are things I think a member of Congress should do. If that's the kind of representation you want, someone who will fight for you and put your interests over either party or both parties in Congress, then I ask for your vote, and I'd be proud to have your support. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Mr. Allen, your closing statement.
Thank you very much. Y'all, it's been a great pleasure to be with you here tonight. And I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for being here, because I really wish this place were full. You know, the biggest thing that troubles me about the country is apathy. And I think I know why. Because, if y'all get as tired of hearing this rhetoric as I do, I mean, it just really disturbs me. In fact, it's all I can do to control myself up here, to be honest with you. Because you hear it over and over again. And I think what I would say to you tonight is this. It's just real simple. I mean, if you like the way things are going, the direction of Washington, I welcome you to vote for my opponent, John Barrow. Because you're going to get just more of the same. But if you want change, if you want a winning football team and your team's losing, what do? You change out the coach. You get a winning coach on board. Folks, I've been out here fighting it for 37 years. I think I'm as highly qualified as anybody to go to the United States Congress and fix the problems we've got. I've been fixing them in business every day. I know what the problems are. I've been in the trenches. I've rolled up my sleeves. I've been in the community working to help folks. Getting back to businesses, creating jobs, and people helping people. That's what it's all about. It's those things, those values that I learned on that farm. That's what's important, folks. And I would tell you this, if you want change, if you want to change the direction of Washington, elect Rick Allen, United States Congress in the 12th District on November 4th. You'll see real change. And guess what? It'll be bipartisan. we'll have tremendous consensus. You'll see some exciting things happen, and I can't wait to get there. Thank you very much.
Candidates, thank you again for being here. Thank you for that round of applause. They're going to remain up here for just a minute if you guys want to come up and shake hands or maybe ask a follow-up. Thank you to the Statesboro Herald. Thank you to Ogeechee Technical College. Thank you to the Francis Johnson and the Johnson Law Firm of Statesboro. And don't forget that early voting is at the courthouse all this week, next week, and all the way up until the Friday before Election Day. Thanks for coming.